Apparently.
Oh.
All right. And we're live. Welcome to The Hook. My name is Aaron Castro. I'm on with Tosan Tutse-Tonwe, founder of Viral Rugby, and we're going to talk governance of rugby in the United States. And as most of you who will watch this know, we just had a big vote at the Congress level. So we're going to talk structures and issues, and then the difficulties of running a 100,000 member organization and how it relates to us as individual members, and then the macro on how we go forward and make progress. And Tosan, over to you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on, man. I like the idea of what you've put together to get going. I think that we're at a stage with rugby in the U.S. where it's exceptionally important that we have a public discussion, not just about the play and competition, and, the stuff we think about in sports market and the sports market, but also in terms of they talk about governance, they talk about administration, they talk about contracting, they talk about the rules and policy. Think of it about with the NFL. Every time there's a rules change, whether it's in term from the business end or in the competition and playing end, there's a discussion around it. The owners meeting always has a large press coverage around it. And I think, for all the shots that we take at the NFL and other larger professional sports, I think we do have a bit to learn from some of the folks that have been more entrenched and successful here in the U.S. market, which is where USA Rugby is relevant to its stakeholders. Now, by no means are they perfect. I think that that's something that can get lost in minutia when we're comparing things. But I think it's very important that we understand that, look, we're a scaling organization. And if we don't deal with some of these infrastructural issues, we're just going to scale dysfunction. And when you scale dysfunction, that's when it becomes more expensive and more costly to fix, as opposed to on the front end, where it's cheaper, easier, more effective with less collateral damage.
Yeah, I mean, I really look at all that stuff and I go, we just had, say, governance on the macro on globally. Sonny Bill Williams took a red and was then suspended by World Rugby for 4 games. Mm-hmm. But NZ Rugby Union, basically being the de facto player representation, appealed the ruling, and he was somehow they were able to count this county's warm up, which was as a match. And I'm, rugby is not, I guess, where the NFL is, but like with TMO and how they put the, what the TMO is looking at on the big screen, I'm like, the NFL has the hood. So the ref on the field can just go to the hood and talk to the TMO. And yeah, the guys at home can listen to the TMO, but there's no crowd decision if you're playing the TMO stuff in the hood and not on the big screen.
Correct.
So, and then the NFL is a private organization, but you could say they're not transparent, but they feed the fans and the media tons of information to the point where you think it's transparent. Whereas currently in our organization, I would call it cloak and dagger, and individual members. I don't know how many congressmen that, other than David Yeoman and maybe Ron Watson, talked to their members, whether it was via, email or, putting it on their geographical union website, what they were going to do, what the issues were. And this is where, I get frustrated. Yes, I spoke with my GU VP and GU congressman, and I'm just they didn't agree with me. But a lot of people are getting nowhere with their Congress people, and there's just no information flow, whether it's from the national office, the board, or the Congress down to, the individual member. And, I think about it in the information age, I don't want a press release. I want the bylaws say the minutes have to be done within 60 days. I want the minutes and real minutes, the board meets for 8 hours. So the minutes should probably be
pretty substantial.
Like 30 pages plus attachments.
Yes.
So,
exhibits and appendices.
Yeah. So, and I mean, coming from where I did, like by trade, I was a long range planner in my last assignment in the Army, and I was a reconnaissance platoon leader before that. So
C-130s?
No, Bradley's.
Bradley's. Oh, okay.
On the ground.
I said long planes. I'm like, okay, never mind.
Long range planner, so exercises, operations.
Got it.
So I mean, I come at it from an analytical perspective to look at different things, and I say, well, this makes no sense, because we would have, when I worked in the plan section at the division headquarters, in 30 minutes with the commanding general as the junior member of the plan section, I would have 10, 15 pages of notes that would have to be compiled, because like, it's not that the man, talked that much, but it's just like, you have to capture everything.
The discussion.
And we go into, an 8-hour board meeting from USAR, and I get 2.25 pages.
And I think that's something that struck me as well. And granted, people aren't, this is from my experience. I'm a management consultant by profession. And actually, I've had a couple of engagements in corporate governance where we coordinated the governance of large IT programs that were supposed to fall under policy with PHMSA and FITARA, those things that come out with the U.S. government for buying things over a certain amount. And so it's very important that how decisions are made are very clear and transparent. And the minutes are your lifeblood there, because that's what covers the liability at the executive level. This is what the discussion that was had. These are the people you can show that were informed because they were present. These are the people that contributed to discussion if they had a specific expertise that they needed. They would be expected to have comment on particular things. Now, some people, there's debate between verbatim minutes and meeting capture and bullets. Right now, we're at the bare bones. It looks like something that from high school government. And it's not to slight anybody. These are volunteers. I understand that. If the yearbook committee meets together, that's the meetings I would expect out of that. Where who asks what questions, definitions of abbreviations. It shouldn't be, because we have a rule. And before I was a management consultant, I was in clinical research. So I'd be responsible for improving experiments that are run to evaluate clinical trials. All of my protocols have to be able to be understood by a fourth grader. That's the level of detail that has to be there, and that it can be replicated by somebody who has what they call the most fundamental basic understanding of the science. That's the level of detail that we need. And it's not to be nitpicky or try to say gotcha. It's more in terms of information is your currency in governance. That's how you influence. That's how you facilitate partnerships. That's how you solve problems. That's how you source resources for yourself to address issues, or even in an organizing space, organize volunteers so that people are aware. Because then what happens? Those people understand what direction they're going in. Excuse me, and they can then fill in their role, just like on the pitch, right? So we understand what we're playing with. We understand the direction that we're going. We have a system that the different calls, different words mean different things. We're all speaking the same language, but even if, let's say, we're whoring and we show up on another side, we know left, right, we know deep, we know now, we have specific communication that will allow us to convey the information needed to get the result that we all want because we've agreed upon it. And I think that's a very simplistic sort of explanation of how governance, when you have we have a centralized system, but we behave in a very confederated way.
I think for me, as like an individual member, I look at what other member organizations do, and we're not doing them. And many, like those of us that are now engaged, I wasn't engaged when I first became a player 4 years ago, but I became engaged 18 months ago after we just got I would say the Men's World Cup was not a fun time. And so that's when it started, and then pro failed. And that's when I got really engaged. And
right.
So I just dug in, and there are people that are successful that are willing to lead the change. And right now, for me, there's a stranglehold on the power.
Correct.
Within USA Rugby. And the people who have the ability to shift the power are, I mean, to me, they're choosing not to because for fear of the unknown. But my fear of the known is that with current structure, we're going to fail financially, and failing financially versus plugging the holes in the ship and taking out, a welding torch and, plugging more holes and the like, we're going to lose whatever progress we've made because people are just, if it fails, people are just going to stop playing rugby, and we'll go back to, the beginning of when the union was founded in 75, because for 10 years before then, when rugby was finally coming back out, if you look at the previous 40 years, there was only like 4 places they really played rugby, California and the Northeast. Mm-hmm. And this is, that's why the Olympics was such a huge thing. And then, failure to capitalize, failure to medal. And I thought, medaling would have been extremely helpful, provided that there was a plan to utilize the success. Mm-hmm. And for the men, I thought there was some underperformance, but there was success. For the women, I had a greater expectation because I knew how they could play and then the setup of the competition. Mm-hmm. But
me too. We'll go back to that though, because I have something about that too specifically. So
there's that, but I look at other organizations. So, people ask about soccer, right? Well, I would say it's a federated system because ASO has been around since the 70s. Mm-hmm. And you look at they're not the only youth soccer organization.
No.
USA Soccer does not govern youth soccer at all. USA Soccer has licensed and governs the separate governing bodies. ASO is one of the bigger, but they're not that big. ASO has 500,000 youth players. US Youth Soccer has 3.5 million players. And then you add US Club, and then Soccer American Youth Association, it's called SAY. Mm-hmm. There are close to 5 million youth soccer players. Mm-hmm. And so we look at how we govern. So there's the governance structure of the most successful NGB when it comes to just sheer numbers.
Being able to govern the size of a membership that we aspire to reach.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And we look at, say, US water polo. They have half the organization. Mm-hmm. They run more events, and they're positive on the balance sheet every year by, approaching 7 figures. Mm-hmm. So we're seeing good governance, and water polo, like rugby, at the beginning is inexpensive. Mm-hmm. But as, stated by a person that ran development up in NorCal, Mark Carney, and now works for USA Water Polo as the director of growth, he's saying, hey, people will pay if you provide high quality opportunities of competition. So if you provide all these events, growing up, I was actually a poor kid, but guess what? My parents did everything. We didn't have that much money, but I always had cleats for baseball. I always had a mitt. I always had gloves. And when it came to soccer at the time, I always had cleats for soccer. I always had the equipment I needed. Maybe not the best, but always had the equipment I needed. And I look at, from where I grew up, and it's still, the towns around it are still relatively, poor.
Mm-hmm.
You see tons of kids still playing baseball and soccer. The opportunity exists. So their parents will hit and hustle to provide the opportunity for their children to succeed in almost any venture. And
absolutely.
What we find with rugby is that there aren't events to go to.
Not for the youth.
Not for the youth. So that really constricts, pathways, which is a problem because then it literally is only about the richest because there's no money at the top. Right. So that's one of so being very disjointed and not, using best practices from things we aspire to be really has eaten at me for the last, 8 to 10 months. And we people have identified solutions. And because they're not, I would say not in the club, because I talked to, you were a college coach. I talked to my own college coach. It's like, I would say the people that have a lot of power are college coaches, but the college coach community has been treated so poorly that they're out. They're not going to do anything. They're just going to stay on their island.
Well, in fairness to the coaches, a lot of those coaches, I've been in that same position. We're literally doing everything. We're doing all the administrative stuff. We're doing all of the things that we expect support from a governing body on. We go have to find ourselves and figure out how to get it to the people that are in our charge, whether it's our school team. I coach select side as well. These are things that we had to figure out how to do. Now, we had a good where I am over in Maryland. We had a pretty strong geographic union, fortunately. I think because, rugby has been going on here for a long time at all levels. So I think the local governance was quite a bit more mature in that sense. It wasn't perfect by any means, but at least, we got balance sheets out every meeting. We got minutes that were quite good that people committed to. We did have some issues with some ethics in terms of spending that happened a while back. But even then, that was hashed out and fixed because we had minutes, we had the financial statements, the expectations of how we're good.
And so we go into legally, right? 501c3. The IRS, the government, requires nonprofit organizations to keep the details and to furnish them within 24 hours upon request if they're not posted, right?
Correct.
And if they are posted, if they're redacted, if they're requested, whether it's from the government or an individual, as far as I can tell, they can't. If the real ones are requested, they have to give them up, not the redacted ones that you post online.
Well, usually what happens with that's usually a stall.
Yeah, I'm not sure, but I know that some people have requested full financials to basically, people that are qualified. I have not, but I know multiple people that have requested the full books and they've gotten nowhere. Like multiple requests over the last 12 months. Like every month they ping back. Nothing. And we've had 2 CFOs in that, in that time. And like that's my other, it's like, what happens when USOC, like I know our last USOC audit we passed, but what happens when, like official complaints start being filed because the law is not being followed? Because that's what I'm seeing and that's what I'm being told. And I'm not qualified to go and audit USAR. I've looked at the financials.
What they've made available.
Yeah, what they've made available, and it doesn't jive with me because guess what? A college is a 501, right?
It can
Most colleges.
Mm-hmm.
I know a college down the street from me that's not, but two of them actually. But and they're very successful, But ASU is down the street from me. They're a nonprofit. But just because you're a nonprofit doesn't mean you go negative every year.
Well, exactly. I think that's one of the things that I do. In addition, and I guess it's sort of part of my philanthropy life. I do donation of skills to nonprofits that have raised over $300,000 through an organization called the Taproot Foundation. And it's kind of like what you talk about there. They've come up there, people with a lot of passion, some skills, some abilities, but they basically, based on those things, have beaten down the pavement and raised a certain amount of money. And they're like, oh my gosh, this is happening. So now what do we do? And just what you said there, people think that, nonprofit isn't business. That's not true. There's nothing wrong with a positive margin in having a nonprofit. In fact, that's what you report to show that you're doing, when we talk about, fiduciary duty, right? We are being efficient at all levels of measure of performance. Financially, we're being responsible. Hey, we actually turned a profit. That means we can roll more money into the cause. Our cost per impact on cause is at a certain level. We're able to lower that. Hey, we're doing more with less, and we still have more. That means instead of 2 kids, we can help 5. That's the type of thing that I've pushed with some teams that I've worked with. That when you come up with something, and I think part of the reason is when we think of nonprofits, we automatically think charity, and there's a certain brand that comes with when people think about how that's managed, right? They think it's basically, right now our model is we are giving an organization money for people to do what they want to do, which is recreate and play rugby. And USA Rugby facilitates that through a variety of governance processes. When we donate money, like let's say when the women came through here in DC and we went to Scion and people paid the entry fee and helped them raise money, that was us giving money to people that we like to play the sport they like and represent us. So now that doesn't sound very business, does it? When you think about it,
no.
It's very charity. We need to, if we're looking per strategy 2020, if we're going to grow at the rate that we are set to grow, we need to start looking at it as a nonprofit venture. Where this is, look, we're not here to indemnify ourselves and make money. We are here to increase the value of rugby to our stakeholders. That's what we're here to do. We're increasing access. We're facilitating partnerships. We're facilitating safety. We're facilitating access to the game, those things. Because if the goal is this lofty number that we talk about by 2020, and our retention rate doesn't change, that means we have an enormous task ahead of us. Enormous. We're losing 51%. That means we have to attract double. 2 years in a row. 2 years in a row. As the math works out. But the thing that concerns me the worst is when I talked about earlier, information's your currency in governance, right? We don't have mature communication processes yet to handle the scale that we have. We don't. They're working on developing that. I think that that's something that when you come up with a plan like Strategy 2020, you put in funds for and you say, look, we are committing this dollar amount and resources and man hours to the following portion to maintain this plan in the populace, right? Because there your value proposition is there. That's where we can see it. That's where we can say, oh, look, we can measure against these things we want to do. It's not a perfect plan. It's not quite the level of a strategic plan that, at least what I would consider my profession as such. It's part of one because it's missing the financials. It's missing sort of the accountability aspects of things. It's expected to be filled out as it goes along. Okay, but that's the document we have. So let's say it's a working document, which is really kind of what it seems to be. Now, from a governance standpoint, that should be in front of more people than the RBEA.
Yeah. And
discussed in front of more people than the RBEA. But because we haven't established who's in and still who's out, because think about how that 51% retention rate works as a nightmare for governance. Who do you talk to? You have a 50-50 chance of them still being involved with you as a stakeholder. That's what that retention number means to me.
Yeah.
So now, how do we dial this in a way that re-engages our stakeholders, our key stakeholders, right? The internal facing folks, people we're looking at and saying, look, we took your SIP money. You play in our competitions that are sanctioned by us. We need you to know the following things. And most importantly, we need the following information from you. It's a two-way relationship for it to be strategic. And I think that's the part that has to mature and fast. Otherwise, we're just going to be kind of throwing good effort at dysfunctional process, which will get us only a percentage of what we want to get in the end anyway.
Yeah, as my first job in the Army, like I said, I was a reconnaissance platoon leader. So my job was to go basically gather intelligence, and through a variety of processes, go, find, isolate, the enemy or a thing, so that the main effort of the operation could move forward. So like, I was told that we used to have SIP cards back in the 90s, back when I had I had no idea what rugby is. So like I said, information, value concept. Like I said, I'm also a member of USA Triathlon. I have a membership card that has like all these discounts. It can get scanned at competitions. And I also, with that comes also a keychain for when you go to competition. So, we talk about verifying processes, and when you go to, and how the national office isn't sort of set up for this. And you could, I swear you could do this at the local union level, really, but insurance verification, citizenship verification, all that stuff. Because, we went to the playoffs my first year playing with the Scorpions in El Paso, and you had to bring your birth certificate.
Yeah, I remember.
I'm like, this is 2017. I can't just submit this when how does my license not, how does just my license not cover this? You had to bring your birth certificate?
Or
two forms of picture ID. Like, what?
Well, the other part that kind of gets me there is that something that, okay, we're paying a SIP fee when we register. Just submit that stuff early.
Oh, yeah. Like, it doesn't,
and it ties to your number. The verification happens up front in one big group, and then they have, as the time goes on, people add on and add on. So there's little blips of activity for that.
Yeah.
But in the end, like, it's that's information that can be easily stored and tagged to your SIP number.
Yeah.
And also you were born once. So once that's verified once, it doesn't need to be verified over and over again.
Yeah, so it's like, if you've been a member,
right.
I would say, so once you've been a member, say you don't SIP the next year, well, rather than reissuing that number,
right,
it becomes historical. And, there are guys for a variety of reasons can't play the next year. And guess what? In USA Rugby, based on how I've seen it, we just let the national office has just let people slip. There's no, I read all my emails, but I SIP every year. So, and whereas, I would say at the values proposition, people say, is retention a local or national problem? Well, on the macro,
everything's a national problem.
Everything's a national problem. And we were I looked at the numbers and I'm like, geez. So 51%.
Wasn't that something?
Yeah, 51% on aggregate. And I've looked at, I looked at what the work for it strategic plan. It wasn't really a strategic plan then. And then the strategic plan before that. My biggest issue with all these strat plans is the only real thing that is in them that you can hold the executive accountable for is growth. There's no retention. There's no other quantitative metric in that the last three things that have been called strat plans. And then the format of the current, I would say, strategic vision, not strat plan, because it's missing so many things that would make my bosses probably kick me out and say, come back in a month.
Come back when it's done.
Yeah.
That's what my client will come back when this is done.
Yeah. So, and then the biggest, it's like what I looked at Strat 2020 and it literally says, will deploy business plan summer of 17.
But there was no milestones for the drafting of it, the review of it, input into it. Are we talking external review?
Yeah, and my biggest, like, for me, coming from where I did, I don't care if it's an executive position, but USA Rugby as the national office has to have a long-range planner on staff, not George Henderson.
An employee.
George Henderson, great rugby man. Yeah. Very skilled.
A good lean guy. Me and him are both lean Six Sigma guys. Yep.
That's all great. I'm cool with that. But a long-range planner on staff.
And that's their job.
And all they do is they organize the planning and they do the heavy lifting, but they bring in the stakeholders to when it's time to build out the plan. But my second biggest, I was like, hey, there's only one metric. Mm-hmm. And why are we doing 3-year plans? Because I look at Ireland, I look at England, we look at best practices. I get into conversations with Gift and he's saying, hey, why should we copy them? I'm not saying we copy. I'm saying we take the best practices.
Take what works for us.
Take the best practices and make them American.
Sure.
That's me. Because the United States is, 5 times the size of population of, the UK.
I'm about to say insert rugby nation here.
Yeah.
Because
insert largest rugby nation, United States, 5 times population.
Mm-hmm.
So our strat plan, and we're so far behind, so our strat plan has to be real different. But there can be, goals. Like one of the things Tony Ridnell says, his crusade right now is hosting, as far as fixing governance here, and the big one is Rugby World Cup 2027. Yeah. And I look at where we are, mm-hmm. and where we should plan, and I looked at Ireland, I looked at France, I looked at Argentina, I looked at the RFU. Every strategic plan is geared around World Cup cycles. So we're talking 4-year plans.
Yes.
And then that's within 3 World Cup cycle projections, and every single one of these countries is trying to host the World Cup because they understand the capital infusion that it brings to their nation. So
given that they have the infrastructure already.
Yeah, and we have the infrastructure. We may not have the relationships.
We've hosted Olympics. We've hosted everything. Yep.
We've hosted 2 Women's World Cups. We've hosted 1 World Cup. Like the last one, this like Qatar World Cup thing, I don't know about that. But so we have and we're hosting the 2028 Olympics through a sustainable infrastructure. The reason why, so 2024 mm-hmm. and 2028 were awarded as a dual bid to France and us, and then there was negotiation. It was the announcement wasn't supposed to happen until the end of September. So LA and Paris, the committees got together and they did the negotiations themselves with the IOC. There was no craziness. And I guess somebody flipped a coin and Paris won 2024 and LA won 2028. And, the IOC is going to be awarding World Cups based on sustainable infrastructure. Because if we let's look at Beijing. Mm-hmm. A lot of that stuff is unused. Let's look at Athens.
I'm about to say a lot of Beijing in general is unused.
Yeah. So, but I mean, and then let's look at Rio. ESPN just did a huge, expose, and then a bunch of exposés following.
I've been following that closely.
There's so many things that aren't they're unused and locked up and just falling apart.
Dead wrong, right? Like I don't know how many people connect the dots, but you saw the political unrest that had been going on. The people are pissed, and rightfully so.
Yeah.
They were saying, okay, this is going to bring money. This is going to bring jobs. Oh, by the way, let's lock out all the hood people. Like, that's basically what they did.
That's what happened. And so we look at, and, you know, I think 2027, especially considering with the Olympics in 2028, is a great target. But
I think so.
For me, based on how I understand planning and have been in operational planning to campaign planning.
Right.
I say 2031.
Okay.
But I say we bid for 2027. The problem with 2027 is Pichot.
Okay.
He's the vice chairman of World Rugby, so he's going to advocate for Argentina, and Argentina has already been putting in the footwork.
Right. And rightful, and in fairness to them, they've done exceptionally well.
Yes. So, I mean, they've done their job.
Right. I'm talking Augustin Pichot, like hats off to that man. Because, like, really, after his when Argentina took third in that World Cup and he retired, he committed himself to a cause in a way that got them into the Rugby Championship. Yeah. They've got a domestic team playing in the Curry Cup. Like, look at these things. Look at what it's done for Argentine rugby. Huge.
Yeah. So, and you look at their strategic plan. They plan 10 years out, and they do 1-year plans that are readily available. If your Spanish is good, my Spanish is not, so it takes a little more work. But I got a guy.
I got a guy that can help me out.
You can go find their strategic plan. All the English ones and the French one, like the French language ones, I'm on. Like, we good. Spanish, my Spanish is not that good. But I found it, and then I found their, like every year they project 18 months for their yearly plan. Mm-hmm. And that includes finances, that includes everything. And what we've got, there really wasn't a cogent long-range business plan for all of Nigel's tenure. There really wasn't
felt like it was a moving target.
There really wasn't a yearly plan, and there's a bunch of bodies buried somewhere. I don't know. But the money, the biggest thing for USA Rugby and growth is bodies and revenue.
Yeah. And right now our model is basically the bodies bring the revenue.
Yeah. Now. And if you look at, and this is where I say, hey, look at, best practices. Not really New Zealand, because NZRU owns 50% stake in each of the super franchises. And then
I did not know that.
Yeah. So don't
really.
Yeah. And so All Blacks,
that's kind of ugly for me.
The All Blacks make all the money. And then, so the way it's set up right now is the Mitre 10 is run completely subsidized and loses like 2 million NZ dollars a year.
Okay.
And
what do you have any idea of what the percentage of the total revenue that is?
Of NZRUs? I have no idea, but I know that AIG's paying their sponsorship for the next 7 years is $10 million a year.
10 million. Okay. I'm just math. Sorry.
Yeah. And then you look at, hey, the Lions tour, how much revenue that brought into the country, how much revenue, like every single match was sold out. So you're talking
and stimulated a lot of business in those communities
so
too.
Stimulated a lot of business and sold a lot of beer in the stadium. So that was 10 matches there. The Rugby Championship, they host 3 matches just in the Rugby Championship alone. And Super Rugby, for the most part, is profitable.
Yep. Well, that's all because strictly on the strength of its broadcast, on its broadcast revenues, because this ESPN deal, it's got them everywhere.
Yeah.
Which was brilliant.
But I've seen a lot of NZ Super games compared to, other than the Stormers in South Africa, if you look at the original super countries, NZ isn't NZ other than, that semifinal of, was it Crusaders Chiefs? Other than that match, where there was like a couple thousand seats gone and people are like, hey, it was cold, hey, it was rainy, and I just look at a picture of Green Bay, in February.
Right. Exactly.
And
I'm originally from Cleveland.
So
I'm not moved by weather.
So I have no, I've got no sympathy there because American sports fans will go. So
if it matters, that we're there.
And the tickets were cheap. Like Tri-Zone,
I saw that.
$8, 15 NZ. So that's 8 US.
Mm-hmm.
But the majority, other than the Stormers, which were basically sold out this year, if you wanted to go to any other super franchise in South Africa, $4.
Yeah.
The Lions sold out their the finals, so that's great. But everyone else, like you had 60 rand tickets, but maybe 4,000 or 5,000 people going to a match in a 35,000 person stadium. And I guess their business model in Saru is not they really don't care about ticket sales, but that's like a 30-year revenue you just don't care about.
Well, and I think and I think there's a vision issue there too. So now we look at what happened with the Kings and the Cheetahs going to Pro 14, right?
Yeah.
So your revenue, I call it a revenue portfolio, right? When you have a program, you have a portfolio of revenue sources, and then you prioritize them accordingly. That's the one thing I felt was completely missing from the strategic plan. Okay. What is our revenue portfolio? What are our inflow and outflow sources? Well, how much is going to what type of service? How much is going towards, I don't even care what the numbers are. If they're wrong, whatever, ghastly, beautiful, whatever. Let's get a sense of, are we spending 15% of our revenue on this? What should we be spending on it? Wait, how much are we actually spending on actual governance?
Yeah. So,
these are things that I would like to know.
So we look at cities, like revenue that is controlled and whatnot, since RIM exists and the CEO has no control over that revenue. He gets his little check and he runs away because that's organizational dysfunction to the nth degree.
Absolutely.
It's a subcorp. So the CEO who reports to the board of USAR, in my mind, should be
sub S.
Sub S. I'm not.
So there's sub S, sub C, and then there are a couple of other variations.
It might be I think it's a sub C. I'd have to look. No, sub C I think is the trust, and Dan Payne sits on the board as CEO. But as CEO, he doesn't even sit on the board of RIM, so he can't direct anything.
Now think about why that's detrimental, just in terms of what the traditional role of a CEO is in terms of an organization.
Yeah.
Can you imagine any other company operating in such a way in the US? I can't speak on any other nation's business laws.
No. For me, because I
look that type of responsibility and have that little.
Yeah. For me, I look purely at, I always look at not government, but I look at military hierarchy. So there's USAR, right? It has a bunch of staff functions up top. And then it has subunits. We say maneuver units, right? In the Army. The two maneuver units of USAR are RIM and the trust. And it's we sort of report to you, but we don't. And, you had that, on my last installation, you had, units that reported to the commanding general because he was the senior mission command of the installation. But they belong to somebody else. So that's basically what RIM is. RIM, yes, is on the same installation, but somebody else is their daddy.
Correct.
And that's the problem. And so you can't integrate them into the strategic plan without, having full oversight of them, which is my problem, which is, the huge problem for me. But then it literally confines him to the trust should not be funding, representative side trips. The brand of the Eagles, women and men, should be able to generate the type of revenue that can fund the whole program. A men's Eagles test today should sell out in a 10,000 person stadium.
Yeah.
But we've given out all the rights to marketing to RIM. Not that it was any better before RIM, but we've seen the failure in the last 2 years.
Very
true. And that is that should be your primary revenue driver is the Eagles, their sponsorship and event sales. And that should fund everything. And I mean everything, because you look at the big unions or you look at the big NGBs here, your SIP fee, so your membership fee, covers one thing, not operations, member services. So insurance and the little card you get or the magazine I get, all the printouts that you receive, because USA Try, they push a lot of information via their website, their Facebook, but you also get a quarterly magazine.
Right.
Every individual member has voting rights. Think about that. It's the information age.
Yes.
Depending on what sub-union you're in, the president of the GU is the Congress member. So he may be a great president of your GU. And so he's going to hold that seat forever. But as a congressman, he might be more focused. He or she might be more focused, on their regional foxhole than it is to take the big picture and say, time to take a stand.
Well, correct. And I think also most bylaws that I'm most familiar with, there is a clause that those positions are rotating unless there is no one to stand in that place. So one of the things that we talk about with whether it's board seats, whether it's congressional seats or whatever, any type of, let's keep it very general, executive and legislative, right? Both of those have to have a certain amount of rotation, even if it's one of those things that person stands again. And that's because they can and they need to and blah, 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 blah. But in the end, the goal is your program development should be, remember we talked about long-range planning? So the buy-in of a long-range plan that's going in the right direction, people are just going to want to continue anyway. Yeah. And if it's not going in the right direction, then it needs to change anyway. And you have people coming in with fresh pairs of eyes that are going to kind of, it can be chaotic. I mean, that's like when we say in the lean in process improvement, like the idea of a Kaizen event. A Kaizen event is blow it up and put it back together again from the beginning, and you find where you made the mistake in terms of how you organized and configured your system. I think that also what you mentioned about the hierarchy that you experienced in the military. I think that, one thing I've always said about the military is the largest learning organization on planet Earth. And the ability to convey and interpret information is bar none. Because of over the centuries of practice that the military has had in doing that, and sharing of best practices between allies, right? I think the other part that's really interesting, though, when we went back to the dysfunctional structure, let's go right back to the org chart, right? So we have to ask the question: what does USA Rugby do? They govern? What is governance? Right. Well, the architecture of any organization includes infrastructure, business operations, and then let's say something internal that's around in terms of the program, right? So you have your strategic stuff, you have that's where you're planning and et cetera. There's business operations, and then there's something that involves your tools. So let's say it's technology facing, that type of deal. So you have your people, processes, and tools across the top. Now, looking at USA Rugby's operation, what are their business operations? What are their strategic operations? And then what are their technical operations? So what would that be? That's your structure. You hang those things off of those trees right there. Whether it's risk management, we talk about safety, right? Financial risk management, insurance. Now we talk about business operations. Facilitation of partnerships, right? So we talk about sponsorship. We talk about dues. We talk about sourcing. How do we source the people that actually help us do what we do? Whether it's broadcasting an event or, hey, maybe pay a few $100 to take care of your minutes.
Yeah, for minutes, I'm like, well, hey, you go on to Craigslist, you put an ad for a court reporter, and you give them $300.
Or a medical scribe.
Yeah,
those kids are out of high school.
Well, I say court reporter because they have that like crazy little typewriter
with the roll.
Yeah, exactly. So like if you're in a meeting, they can read back, right? Mm-hmm. And then it's the ones they have now, they record that, in a Word document. So when it's time to get revision and then publish, that thing's done in 2 weeks rather than the bylaws say 60 days.
Right.
The last one, it was closer to 90.
Yeah.
And the Congress put out a statement, and then the presiding member, that not Chairman Chang, who is the president, but the presiding member, which is the Jeremiah Johnson, the congressional board member, wrote this really long thing on Facebook that I could go find that I really don't want to get into, but
I remember this.
It was a diatribe, basically him whining about. I was like, dude, read the bylaws. It requires you to have minutes taken every Congress meeting, and the bylaw, the Congress minutes they put out, there actually was a lot of detail, but it's also a question of, hey, what's not in here?
Well, and this is just what you said there, right? What's not in there? When you don't trust an organization, that's a question the stakeholders ask. We don't know what the value proposition is. We don't know what's being talked about behind closed doors. So people make up stories. They literally make shit up. Like that's literally what ends up happening because we don't know. And that's when you talk about managing people and stakeholders. When you are a governing organization, your stakeholders should never be in the dark. Anybody that pays you, especially $1, they should know what their role is in your value proposition, even if they're getting a crappy deal. Because guess what? If you're delivering honestly, a lot of people will accept crap. That's why so many people shop at Walmart.
Yeah. I mean, why do you think Walmart and Target? Hey, Kmart's still alive.
Sure is. Kmart, Big Lots, the places where you just go in, get out what you can get, whatever. They're good.
So,
dollar stores are doing great.
Dollar General is a massive corporation.
Yes, it is.
So, I look at it's just massive organization dysfunction, and I don't understand why. I mean, I know like we at the RBEA conference, which I was going to go to, but I was told it was a waste of time.
Yeah, I would have had to. I planned to be there in San Diego, and my wife would have. She works with AFRICOM. She's a project manager for the research into that. For some of the HIV, TB stuff over there, and we would have had to do a handoff with the baby that day, basically. And I would have to go, and I'm like, well, is this? I would have done it if I was confident what we were going to get out of it.
Yeah, I was there, and I said, I talked to two people I knew were going. They were like, based on where you guys are at, like my paramour, my not yet spouse, was like, she had court on. At this point, we do rugby and we do triathlons together.
Nice.
So when, if things work out, we go to the 2019 World Cup, she's coming. Next summer for the 2018 Rugby World Cup 7, she's coming.
Yep. So I'll definitely see you there then.
Yeah. So, I mean, she had court. She's an attorney, and that just wasn't going to happen. So it wasn't worth going the day ahead for me, even though I had a place to stay if I needed it for that night. Mm-hmm. And then I ended up, talking to a few people that went, and they're like, well, I mean, it really wasn't worth the $300 it cost me. And
On top of the plane tickets and etc.
Plane tickets, hotels, tickets to the game, etc. And so, and now the panels are available to be viewed. If anyone hasn't seen those, I can send you. I'll put a link in the description when this thing's over.
Yeah, or also shoot them to me. You can shoot them to me as well. I've looked. I haven't really gone too in depth because once I realized how top heavy the organization is, I kind of lost a bit of faith in the value of the exercise in the sense of what we're going to be influencing.
Yeah, my biggest thing is like I know who you want to come here. I know who you want to come here. You're going to get a few of them, but the big ones, they ain't coming.
All right.
Because they've told you, whether it was the current chairman or the last chairman, it's like, until you fix your stuff, you're not going to get a dime from me. And I will, and it's like, and these people will unload millions of dollars.
Yes, I've been saying, you know what? Me and Gift talked about this about a year ago when I was talking about when he interviewed on his show. Was it? Oh yeah, on his show. Gift. Shout out to Gift Time Rugby. That people that invest, whether it's social investment or otherwise, in businesses or nonprofits, because they are businesses, have a certain expectation of value. And if it doesn't pass their smell test, you're not going to get a dime from them. These people that understand what an organization is supposed to do. And they're waiting for the system to look like so they can see through the bottom and say, okay, you know what? If I drop $5 million, maybe let's say take 10% of my $50 million annual revenue into this organization, am I going to look like an idiot in 2 years? It's about brand. We've talked about, I think, Hiwas, the guy who's just I've talked to him at length as well. It's funny, we all he being on the inside, it's funny that me on the outside came to the same conclusion he did when we just started talking a couple months ago, that anybody who is at the level, at least that I've worked with in business, at the executive level, the expectation of how people invest should be something that is a part of your development plan. Yeah. And if in that development plan, maintaining and building trust for partnerships isn't the major aspect of things, like we want to have the sponsors that are talking about Me Too. The guys that are invested there that saw that, let's say, Kraft saw that somebody that General Mills invested in this. So wait, I got to get into this too. So there are 10 guys that are these people. So who's going to get this $500,000? Yeah, that's the process that we got to get into.
It's not just, not just individuals. Individuals, and I'm talking, the people. Everyone knows who I'm talking about. Yeah. Everyone knows in the rugby world knows who I'm talking about. And the man, he's not the only one, but he funds, his alma mater's rugby program. Like he just goes.
Entire thing. I know that man. I know that man.
So
and he has a history of investing in sports, period.
Yeah. And investing in startups.
Yep. All that stuff. And has no problem taking a risk, but we ain't seen a dime of his money. That should tell you something.
Yeah. So and it's not just individuals. It's companies, it's foundations. AIG. So they're a sponsor, right? They sponsor the junior All-Americans, both men's and women's, and the girls and boys high school All-Americans. But I'll tell you what we're getting from them for that is what I call charity and not funding.
Because it's just a different. It's a different ball game.
Putting AIG on the jerseys doesn't provide them value. It provides our brand value, whereas them putting their AIG on the jerseys of the All Blacks and the Black Ferns
gives them value.
Gives the All Blacks value. Because,
brand on brand.
So people say to me, well, American companies should do this because they just want to help grow the game. And it's like, no.
That's not how this works.
It's like what provides value.
Exactly.
Guess what?
Can I sit in front of the VP of marketing for, let's say, let's not even talk about popular companies. Let's talk about like with the top merchandising company on the planet, like maybe AEG or somebody like that. Sit in front of them and say, okay, what can we do here? This is our membership. This is our vision. This is what we've done. This is what we plan to do. These are our faces. This is our operation. And you could be a part of that. And this is what you will get for sponsoring us as a partner. That's what I want. I'm waiting to hear that in USA Rugby.
What's funny to me is like, so we started RIM, right? And we talk about best practices. RIM, if executed in a strategic plan with the correct people, with the correct systems, could work and could be the, to quote Will Chang from a set of board minutes, RIM could be the gift that keeps on giving.
Correct.
But the problem is that the Eagles, which is the brand right here, is an immature product.
Yep.
So if you do not talk to your partners, and we have connections, right? John Prusmack, the owner of UWS, is a financial partner with USA Rugby. We are the minority partner in USA Rugby Sevens LLC that runs, Vegas Sevens, because we couldn't handle it, and we had to find a partner. And I wouldn't say we got held down the barrel, but we were going to lose the tour stop. And John, who had represented on what were the USA Owls at the time, but now are the Classic Eagles, so USA Old Boys, who had played rugby on a representative side of the union, went out, and he's like, I can do this. We will keep the tour stop. And I wonder if you read back in the board minutes, at certain points there were World Rugby and UWS didn't have a good relationship. And I wonder if that was mainly because of our previous CEO and maybe some of our current board members. I wonder if the dysfunction was fomented because John just wants to make money and grow rugby, and he's thrown a lot of money at American rugby, to make it a business.
Exactly.
And so why didn't we go to UWS with saying, hey, or why didn't we go to AEG? Because guess what? One of the greatest American rugby players in the history of our union, right, is their director of rugby, or IMG. Like, they have the training centers, IMG Academy, world-class facility. We could literally enter into a partnership with them and go there. Or like AEG owns facilities that are the exact same. We could enter into a partnership, whether it's marketing, whatever.
Something.
And because, hey, they're basically all three of them. All three of those promotion entities have thrown a lot of money at rugby, whether it's in concert with the union or on their own. And our professional relationship with them is almost non-existent. We are a minority partner, and we get like a small check from UWS every year, but we don't. And so my question is, like, we have all these partners, and I talk to say gift, like we have everything. How do you make money? Relationships.
Right.
Relationships. So so Walmart makes money based on the relationship with their consumer, based on being able to provide inexpensive goods, whether it's a crappy good or a good
whatever
good.
It is.
It doesn't matter, right? Amazon makes money based on the relationship it has with its consumers because it delivers.
Correct.
To your doorstep. And their Prime membership, I would say a massive amount of people, maybe even half their consumers in the United States, have Prime. because of that relationship. What is that?
And are willing to pay a sense of dues to be a part of that.
You know, what is it like?
$50 to $90.
$50 to $90 a year right now. It's going up.
Yeah,
I think
depending on where you are. Your student, it's like 50. I think if it's it's 90 for that. But to the point that even Walmart has done the same thing.
Yeah.
To be able to have that convenience. But let's take it a step further. What determines a relationship? The value of it, right?
Yeah.
What does the value it?
So,
it's the experience.
Yeah.
There's a great read, Human Sigma. So how do you manage your managers and your client and your client experience, because they have to be managed in the same ecosystem as stakeholders. So you have to look and say, okay, Human Sigma, the idea that humans are volatile and they form their own biases and beliefs based on the experiences they have with your product, brand, or the service that you provide to them, or in our case, governance. So how are we managing both of these things in this ecosystem? Much like Amazon does through their customer service, or Walmart does through their customer service, making sure that it's not even customer service, it's customer experience.
Yeah.
Right?
What is...
Or even like when we talk about the Rugby channel or any other delivery of content, right? What is the user experience with the interface? These are all part and parcel of people's relationship with what we're delivering as far as rugby in the United States.
It's like, you know, I think, what is American rugby's, you know, when the term CRM was thrown at me, I was like, what, like risk management? No, so CRM in the business world is consumer relationship management. What is USA Rugby's consumer relationship management model? Because as members,
what model?
Yeah, what model? As members, what are they using to manage it? You know, Salesforce has a great, you know, CRM.
Yep. NetSuite's another one that's cloud-based.
And so what are they using to manage the relationship with us?
Or a spreadsheet. Yeah. What are they doing? I'll take that. I will take that.
Hey, you can do tons of stuff in Excel if you're good at coding.
Absolutely. I've made a living out of it.
You can do a CRM in spreadsheet format on Excel, world class, no problem. You just have to be good at coding. I am not.
Right. If you're decent at SQL, right, and you organize the information in a scalable way that's consistent, you'll have no problem with it.
Yeah. So, you know, you read back through the history of board minutes, and they don't treat like we're members. So you treat us. There's two things. As members, we are basically shareholders.
Mm-hmm.
We say stakeholders, but shareholders, right, of a corporation. We should all have one vote, which we actually don't have one vote. We don't. And we're consumers. Correct. So, but what they treat us as is purely as revenue, like,
or revenue and risk.
Revenue and risk. So because they provide insurance, and the issues with the insurance, everyone can discuss about how that works, but the issue with insurance is just one. The reason why our premiums have gone up and we haven't been able to renew our policies with the best in class corporations is because players thought they could get away with it on the aggregate and not have their own personal insurance. So our premiums went up because USA Rugby had to just eat it. Yep. On the loss risk. And so this is where, you know, we talk about documents you feed in at the beginning of the year. Well, and current insurance.
Well, let's talk about that too, right? Because we go to retention rate. When I was coaching college, I also coached a senior women's team. And one of the biggest attrition issues that I had before Obamacare said people can be on their parents' insurance until they were 26 is I don't have insurance. I can't play rugby. Yeah. And I don't have a job that gives me insurance. But we're competing against nations that actually have nationally provided single payer.
Yeah, I mean that's a different discussion to an extent. It doesn't really matter to me as far as whether it's as far as the government's role. in insurance. I'm just saying, like, to make
as
it
much as the environment that we're dealing with versus
but I'm
compared
just
to other
saying is
nations.
like, if we just talk, just to make it, I'm gonna try and make this 30 seconds. Preamble says promote the general welfare. So the government's job is to make sure, not necessarily provide a single payer, but to provide regulation so that all insurance is affordable. So that, you know, if something bad happens, if you have cancer tomorrow,
and it meets a standard,
and it meets
that's for the better of welfare.
Regulate, not necessarily regulate price, but make sure things are in there so that it's affordable to almost everyone. Packages are affordable to almost everyone, so that if I enrolled today and got cancer tomorrow, I would be fine.
Yep. Well, yeah, the people that will take care of you will be compensated for taking care of you, and that you'll have access to the treatment at the very least at the cost that you'll be able to get it.
Yeah.
And maintain it and remain compliant without undue burden.
And the issue we had with that, I would say 10 years ago, before Obamacare and all that fun stuff. No, longer than that, when I was in high school. So you could not play sports in high school when I was in high school in California unless you had insurance.
Correct.
So parents, you know, for whatever reason, decide to not carry insurance. And I remember this specifically because guess what? Football coaches have liability. Schools have liability. Yes. So they're like, hey, you don't have insurance? There's this policy provided by the state of California.
CHIP, right?
Yeah. So go. Like, and it wasn't that expensive. And I think that policy really doesn't, like, it's not really that good anymore because of the convoluted deals that occurred with Obama.
It made a mess. And I'll tell you, let me give you some, I guess, a little bit more background on me. So I guess after I finished my MBA, my first, after working in executive continuous improvement in pharma, I moved into a policy position testing basically as a quality CME in health policy on the ACA. So after it was written, I was coordinating pilots to test different aspects and measures and metrics about whether we're talking about utilization, whether we're talking about what's costing the most, and how do we drive these two things in the direction that the policies. Basically, they wrote it and said, "Okay, now make this work." Which was a mess in itself. But following what you're saying was absolutely correct. That my whole original point was that we're dealing with a certain environment that causes the governing body to have to deal with risk in a way that our other governing bodies that we compare to don't.
Yeah. And, you know, same with ASO, because there were kids that ASO or US Youth Soccer, they also have policy, like, because of their insurance provider.
Yep.
Hey, you only get limited, like, certain liability by membership dues. Oh, you don't have real insurance? There's this policy you can go buy right now.
Yep. And that's what we're missing.
And, you know, we don't have that relationship with our provider at this time.
Nope.
And otherwise it would exist as far as I'm concerned.
Right. Well, and also let's take it a step further. This is my vision for USA Rugby. So let's say 2030, we've reached a revenue where we have an endowment where people can apply for subsidy from the governing body. Hey, you know what? You can't afford it, or your income's under a certain amount. Here, this is the policy that we can do. Your dues are this amount reduced. This is what you have access to through this provider. It's not going to be the best thing in the world, but it'll save you from bankruptcy if you separate a shoulder.
So, and you know, someone decided, like, this last year, we just faced one of, you know, the worst injuries that has happened in U.S. Rugby.
Yes,
you know, Robert Paylor.
Yes,
and I mean,
shout out to him and prayers to him for his recovery.
Jack Clark posted on his verified page, not on his personal page, but he posted an update. He's starting walking rehab. Very difficult. Very difficult.
There we go. Go ahead and fight, boy. Keep going. I like it.
It's going to be a very difficult thing, but I think eventually the human body's amazing.
It is. And,
you know, so talk about insurance. Like, So he's covered by his parents, right? Have to be, right? Cal has certain insurance for its club athletes and its NCAA athletes.
Mm-hmm.
USA Rugby's insurance is nothing. And someone said, "Hey, why does there need to be a GoFundMe?" I was like, the reality is the cost of his treatment is so high.
Yeah.
If he wants to,
he blew through his cap he'll blow through that within 2 months.
Yeah. So there was a reason why, that GoFundMe had to be started, because if he's able to walk, if his rehab is successful and he's able to walk again, we're talking about someone that's barely able to walk.
Yes.
We're not talking about someone that can play rugby again. We're talking about someone who can basically walk.
He's going to need medical devices. He's going to need clot monitoring treatment. All these things that go into that for him to maintain his quality of life. There are health necessities.
Yeah.
So he's going to his out-of-pocket maximum very quickly. So
that's the reason why the GoFundMe needed to be started. And he had insurance. Cal had insurance.
Yes.
He had that, nice little $25,000 policy from USA Rugby.
Or how about modification of the home for him to actually move around where he grew up. You know what I mean? These are things that are important.
And so I didn't understand why someone asked that question, and they're relatively prominent person within the government structure. And I
remember reading that exact thread, and it hit me too, kind of in a similar way. And I think that people are in a position where they're so jaded by feeling like they're being milked financially, quote unquote. Yeah. There's this position that they feel even simply paying dues every month, every year, is being milked by rugby. And they say, okay, well, I paid for this thing. Why isn't this thing that I paid for handling it? But they don't really know the limited extent of what they paid for actually does.
Yeah, and that's as we continue to hit about in our talk, that's all information flow. Because if you go onto the website, if you have to find it, I had to Google it, and it gave me a section of USA Rugby's website, and I had to reverse to get back to and
it's a good way to do it because their interface doesn't link to everything.
Yeah, so Exis Global is our insurance. If you look at the policy that it lists and what everything that comes with it, the file is called AIG 2014. That was the last year AIG covered us.
Yep.
So,
or at least they posted that. They posted, a summary of benefits.
That summary of benefits isn't even from our current policy.
Right.
So how are we supposed to know? How are the members supposed to know? And this is where I talk about, that little mailer that I got that you get every year from USA Try. You don't get a new membership card, by the way, unless you lapse. If you lapse, then
they have to send you another one.
They have to send you a new one. But you get a full packet, talks about benefits, discounts, everything.
Mm-hmm.
What does that cost? 50 cents maybe per. And USA Try is the exact same size as USA Rugby.
Mm-hmm.
But guess what? Like I said, what I pay for comes right back to me. Mm-hmm. I don't fund the national team. Mm-hmm. I don't fund the developmental sides. All their money comes from sponsorship and event sanction.
Mm-hmm. So
if someone wants to hold an Olympic triathlon, they owe USA Try something. Because Olympic distance and sanctioned sprint distances, which are all done in the open water, require you to get event sanctioned through USA Triathlon. Pool sprints do not, because they're not official times.
Okay.
So you want all official distances have to be done through USA Triathlon. If they're non-official distances, or there's a series that's going to start next year, Lifetime Fitness. They run an Olympic series right now. They're going to do some crazy thing called, it's like obstacle course triathlon. It's going to be weird. Kind of like this, like the Tough Mudder type stuff. Yeah, it's going to be really interesting.
Spartan race maybe.
But there's already like a type of triathlon that isn't sanctioned at all, and that's called Xterra. And what is Xterra is it's a cross country triathlon. It's a series. You swim in the open water, and then you mountain bike, and then you trail run. That's not a that's not a world triathlon event, and it's not a USA triathlon event. So they have to have their own insurance. Right. So the benefit of being a USA tri-sanction event is getting event insurance through the national body.
Oh, so this actually, so it's advantageous. Let's say I want to host something. So I pay, that covers whatever portion of the coverage that they would be providing through that. Yeah. USA Triathlon makes a small, like a margin within their strategic plan of what they've expected per event. And then you have access to this well-run experience as a stakeholder of USA Triathlon, because you came here to compete. So you paid your money, you scanned your thing, you got some discounts on some electrolyte drinks, and you go out there and you compete.
Yeah. And so other than, like pool sprints are not really, they're not festival-like. Okay. But every big triathlon, I've not done an Ironman, but I'm doing an Olympic in September, which is for a hooker is amazing. I'm going to die. But
good luck, homie.
Yeah. But it's a full-on festival. So the day before, there's an all-day festival. There's demos. You have to bring your bike in. It's secured overnight. So you don't have to get there super early.
Service.
Nothing. Yeah, sir. And you paid for it. Like I paid $50 for USA Tri. Then I paid $100 for this event. But there's medical service everywhere. There's water. There's porta-johns in the middle of the run. Things like that. I'm paying for the service. They deliver. Otherwise, they wouldn't.
There's no questions. You're like, I have this, I have that, and I use these things.
Yeah, and they wouldn't like the organization, because it's you're running and you need hydration. If they just let you go, would not grow.
Right.
So what we have with USA Rugby is my money is funding operations. My money is not funding the national team because the bylaws do not allow that. Unless
I read that was tough. I was like, dang.
So unless I pay through the trust, which I did, okay, helped fund the women go. I didn't pay a lot, but I threw my $50 in.
Yeah, I thought we all do what we can do.
And it's like, but the women's sponsorship, because they don't have a lot of tests, like our sponsorship deal with Emirates should cover the majority of
that whole operation.
The whole operation, and then the cost overruns should be covered by like event profits.
Right.
And that puts us at like a 0 plus, and then you take the trust. If you put us at a 0 and then the trust just does its thing, the trust shouldn't be funding age grade, shouldn't be funding anything. It should be building an endowment for the future, because the trust is only like 5 years old.
Right.
It should be funding a campaign, it should be a capital campaign so that we can do regional development in the future.
Perpetually.
Yeah, perpetually. But the trust and, some nice benefactors of USA Rugby, which I don't understand why they keep opening their checkbooks, but that's just me.
God bless them.
Yeah. They're filling the holes.
Yeah.
Like we had a private donor fund the Falcons for the Punta del S7s earlier in the year. And then we had a donor fund the U20s to go to Canada for the Junior World Trophy qualifier. And we didn't have a coach. We don't have the coach used to be a college coach. They listed when I saw he's an employee of USA Rugby. So I'm not saying anything about his skills. I'm saying he had another job at USA Rugby, right? And they listed the job when I saw it, because I look at these things from time to time. And the Junior All-Americans coach was a volunteer basis only thing. And then the Junior All-American Sevens, God bless Steve Lewis, He applied. He
That
applied
man,
for.
that man is committed.
He applied for that job, and it's also uncompensated.
Yep.
So, you know, all the growth we've had has been in the youth, but we've lost senior members. I think it's closer to a 1-for-1 from member to member and club to club. We've lost as many senior clubs throughout the country as we've gained, under 18 clubs, because we have not grown in the last 5 years. In fact, you could look at it and
think
we've
about
gone
the
down.
skew. Think of the skew if we talk about that 51%, right? So we talk about the growth at the youth level, but then then temper that with a 51% attrition rate.
Yeah,
that means that you're still attrition, even if it's 1%. Your attrition is still at a you're at a majority level. If you go on for, let's say, at 50 years, that means you end up at 0.
Yeah,
because of how that's set up.
So
that's I think when I talk about professionalism, right? We talk about professional, we think only high performance. No, that means that there's certain things that aren't just some things that people that put their hands up to do. Once you become a professional organization, those are, if it fits within your strategic objectives, you fund it. So, somebody's accountable for doing it.
I always like to look back at soccer, not USA Triathlon, because they just had their own bylaws issues before I became a member. They were trying to reform the board, and it was controversy. It got defeated because it would have reduced the ability for the membership to represent themselves on the board. Because the way the board is organized right now, there's 8 at-large members. Then you also have international athletes. At the time, an international athlete could run for an at-large position.
Okay.
Because it allows, and yes, it's still, although currently no international athlete holds an at-large position, the bylaws allow an international athlete to run, because as long you have to be a member in good standing. So that means you paid your dues and you did an event this year. 50 signatures. You submit that to the nominations committee. You can be nominated by someone else, but if you nominate yourself, you need 50 signatures.
Okay.
You also have to have a platform.
Okay.
And every year, multiple seats come up. Well, it's not every year, but every year there's a nomination, multiple seats come up. But the bylaws require multiple nominations per seat. So it is on the nominations committee to figure this out based on who is nominated, pare it down to, because it's also by region, right? So you can't just run for, the South. Like I live in Arizona. I can't just run for the Southeast position. So,
right.
So by region, people submit their packets, they submit their platform, and they basically get to campaign once they're selected by the nominations committee. So once they've selected the 2 or 3 people for that seat, you have to go prove to the community why they should vote for you. And so it's a 100,000 member organization. And over that 6-month period, they get to know you. They get to know why you're a triathlete. They get to know all that stuff. And 100,000 people get a vote. And it was done by mailable ballot last year. But what I don't understand is, like, we have the internet. We know we have there's secure voting via the internet. And I mean, bylaws being what they are, you could say, under 18 or say under 16, their representative holds their vote. You could say U14. If you're 15, I think those guys know what they're doing. And I think, especially today, I think a 15-year-old can cast a vote for the in the favor of the governance of this union. Under 14, I mean, you can do whatever you want. but I'm just, for the masses, just drawing a line in the sand, because you don't want,
you have to pick something.
You can't have an 8-year-old doing this. I mean, you could, but just for argument's sake, their parent gets to hold their vote, right?
Right.
So we can do secure voting online for the board. And so the bylaws require the Congress to be notified 45 days in advance who the nominees are. And it's a ratification process. It's not an election, which I have a problem with, because it's, hey, we selected these people, vote for them or not, whatever. And so when they were notified, hey, here are their names. And I guess at 30 days, it was like, hey, here are their resumes. No context, no nominations packet, like nothing. And the bylaws require the board, since the president of the Congress is the chairman, to submit a packet of all items to be discussed and agenda 30 days in advance. And as we know from the February Congress meeting, the agenda was not published to Congress until the day before.
Right.
So that is against the bylaws. So how they, if we go by the bylaws, the voting is not consistent with the current bylaws of the union. That's my problem. And, I know that some Congress members said to Tony Ridnell, you question my integrity. Well, we have bylaws governing our organization.
Yep. And reporting transparency responsibilities.
And you, as a Congress member, are not holding the executive board, because they're an executive board, and you're not holding the executive chairman accountable for failure to provide good governance of the union, so that we're not, because we're on the, whether they like it or not, we're on the path to what looks to be bankruptcy. And that's what has me fearful. And that's why we're here, today discussing this. So I look at all that and I just don't get it. Like, I've seen on the individual level, we're not such a big organization that individuals can't have a vote. And rugby is all about being a non-exclusive community.
Correct.
And so Michael Feely, you had him on on Viral Rugby, and he's like, he says, I mean, he and I differ on some different things, but he says rugby is not for everybody, but it is for anybody. So what does that say? It's like anyone who wants to play rugby can play rugby. I haven't seen it here, but in the UK, they have mixed ability rugby teams. So you have high motor skills people taking Special Olympics guys, and they're playing together.
Yep.
They're playing together, community. That's what
it's used as a rehab tool as well in some places.
So that is what rugby's about. And what we have at the top level is exclusivity of information, exclusivity of governance, poor governance to what could be argued negligence. And the way the boards are supposed to work, Harvard did a nice little article. If you know Russ Newth, he posted it on his Facebook page. I think it's public for viewing. So the way boards work when they have interesting election processes, ours isn't that bad, because there's another organization that provides oversight over the board.
Yes.
They're supposed to be self-correcting and nonprofits. And our board is currently not they don't correct themselves.
There's a disconnect. It's the accountability and the power to hold to account, or there's a gap there. And basically in the structure of the bylaws between the board and Congress.
So, I mean, we've got a lot of issues, and I see a failure to to address them, whether from financial to shareholder management, not consumer management, because I would say, yes, we are consumers, but we are shareholders first.
Yeah,
and then you have stakeholder management where, there are people that would subsidize, fully fund the union, provided they had value. So we have a values problem. And we have a governance problem.
Transparency.
And for me, I've met some Eagles, and, Tony Ridnell's Facebook is public. So if you ever want to get into those discussions, which is how, I've connected with Jack Clark and some other people and ourselves, and Grant Cole and all these other people from across the country. These discussions are happening and they're being discounted as if they're worthless. But I know for a fact that thousands of members beat up their congressmen. They called them, they emailed them, and the Congress did not respond.
All right. And we're walled off by NDAs, so we have no idea what really went down. Yeah.
So I mean, an agreement that as members of this organization, we are party to. The whole pro rugby sanction, that should be public. I don't know why I would have to go into discovery for that.
Right.
And I've seen parts of it. It was published by our boy Matt McCarthy at Rugby Wrap Up. And I read that and I go, well, the contract I made with my grandma when I was 8 years old to garden her rose garden is way better than that. And I was 8 years old. So, I mean, that was 20 years ago, and I'm like, mine was more like legally proficient and I knew nothing. It was based on hours worked and labor. You get paid, couple nickels here, couple nickels there, whatever. And this thing,
there's an actual statement of work, huh?
Yeah. So in this thing, you looked at that thing and it's like RIM is supposed to do all this stuff. RIM never was set up to do all these things, and the owner of North American Rugby LLC said, hey, they never did that. Well, did you ever contact them? Because based on the sanctioning agreement, you as the owner, they had the first right to all of these things. They weren't exclusive, but they were the first person you were supposed to talk to, and you talked to the CEO over there who gets paid a crazy amount of money. I don't understand that, but he's like, we were never set up to do that. We were never contacted by Pro. Because there was Pro, if you look at that, so RIM, and this is where I think Nigel's like being crazy smart. Hey, I made this idea. Chad, they made it work and it's going to work. And this is how we're going to get money. Yeah, we didn't charge him a good amount of money for a sanction fee, but guess what? He's going to pay RIM to do all of their marketing, and RIM is going to be the player agency. So they're going to get money from the players, which is a bunch of conflict of interest crap.
Yeah.
But Pro was never contacted by the players. The owner of Pro Rugby LLC did negotiations with individual players himself, not with counsel. They didn't have an agent, and there was no marketing ever done other than through Facebook ad buys, which I'm pretty sure the man did himself. Because if you go by the Twitter and you go by the Facebook, I'm very sure, based on the attitude of response, that it was the Facebook and the Twitter for Pro Rugby North America was on his phone, sort of like our current chief executive of the country. They basically are the exact same person. Not gonna lie.
Fair enough.
And like he would, because I'm no. So until recently, I was blocked on Twitter, and so was tons of other rugby media, probably yourself, without ever saying a disparaging thing via tag. So he had to search, he had to search his mentions. And that's how he blocked people. And he blocked, it had to have been thousands of people. Thousands of people. So so there's the organization dysfunction. And I just don't understand why everyone's blaming, like everyone's accepting, oh, it was all Nigel Melville, because
fair enough. Yeah.
Nigel is apparently going to destroy professional rugby in the UK, if anyone's paid attention. Great track record, that guy. Great track record.
I'm like, man, hey.
they're gonna. I think so. The founder of the women's national team, the Red Roses, the founder of the women's national side, is Order of the British Empire. So she has title. She sits on the RFU's board. Do you think that Nigel is going to survive 3 more years?
I'm about to say no.
I think his performance in the first year is gonna he's gonna end up running some tier 3 union into the ground. Because you look at the other tier 2 unions, and I think they're relatively set up, unless they're a Pacific Island one, because they have their own problems of corruption, but their court systems are on those unions like no other. So
really,
oh yeah, like I'll send you something. But yeah, so yeah, so I think we've discussed the problems that we face our union. We've got financial mismanagement, shareholder mismanagement, and lack of a real vision of what we want to do. Because I think the national team, they're a chess piece. They're a chess piece.
Right.
What their record is, it's like doesn't really matter. As long as the ducks are in the row behind them and we continue to grow, eventually we will have the best athletes that we need to compete at a high level and play, at the top end, because there's good governance, good recruitment, all that stuff at every level that feeds into that, wonderful pyramid they want to talk about. But they're a tactical piece.
Sure. Well, I think one thing though with the national team, I feel like a lot of these problems get overlooked when a team is winning.
Oh yeah.
And I think that's when, rescuing a distressed organization with a winning chess piece is one thing versus one that we're not sure. We don't have a coach seated yet.
We have a match in, I think it's what match in 6 weeks. Match in 6 weeks in Uruguay, and they have to assemble in 4 weeks. So
yeah, and that's it. So what are we doing? That's the thing. Like not under contract, hasn't. And to me, these are the people, the head coaches of the national teams, men and women, are the folks that come together and decide the rugby identity for the United States in terms of how we play, what we do, how we do it. Because that's what ideally everyone else should be aligning under, so that everybody's working on the same type of skills as we move up through the ranks. But right now we're kind of blowing in the wind. That's something that, it's like I said, if we are a winning franchise, we're in semifinals repeatedly, like we are in sevens. We're looking at exciting test matches where we're competitive. That means people start looking at who's the next guy, and that means the age grade becomes more exciting. The people are focusing on that and talking about those folks and where are we sourcing the talent for these. That's one of those things where now people are so excited about the product, they see value in the initial investment. So they're like, oh wow, wait, the guys don't have $100,000 to travel. Let's get that handled, and it gets handled. Because of that's the nature of how those things end up going, because the perception of the brand now, they see value, their relationship to it. It's something that they aren't worried about the outcome having invested in it. Once again, it becomes an investment. It doesn't become, I'm giving you money to get this done because we said we would do it.
Yeah. So it's going to be a long slog. And I think I would not be surprised if you and I are back here in 6 months to discuss the lack of progress.
Well, yeah, I think, yeah.
I really hope, and hope is not a course of action, hope is not a method, that the promises of accountability occur.
I hope so too, and I hope that we retain some of this engagement that the stakeholdership has drummed up. Because I don't think that engagement should only happen when things are rough. I think that we have to be consistent in our level of engagement as stakeholders. It's keeping discussion going. I think because that also drives a bit of accountability.
Yeah, I mean, like stakeholder management, just as a last example before we sign off, is so the provinces, so the big union of Ireland ran a deficit this year. It's the first time in a long time. Usually they make a lot of money, right? They ran a deficit because the provinces needed money this year. So the IRFU had to go find the money so that the provinces could float. And the Irish Rugby Football Union said, "Hey, publicly to its membership, we're not gonna do this. This is gonna be, a once in every 10 years thing, and we don't even want to do it once in every 10 years." They told the media. They told their membership first. Shortly after that, there were articles in the press.
Yep.
Like they are these I mean, yeah, they play their own cloak and dagger games over because it's, even World Rugby's still, run by old white men. But the big unions provide enough information that is, edible, digestible to their membership, that their membership isn't coming out with pitchforks, and there is a level of understanding of the problems. Whereas as the beast awakens on our side of the pond, is many of us understand the problems. But the power to implement solutions is just so closely guarded.
Yep.
That's where we're running into our walls and our obstacles. And there was progress because in this last Congress meeting, 7 votes went up against both board nominations. And that's the first time from anyone's recent memory, maybe ever, that a board member had opposition of any kind. So, and if you go back to February, Steve Lewis, God bless the man, was the lone. He wasn't crying wolf then, but people were probably looking at him as if he was crying wolf.
Or maybe they were thinking maybe sour grapes because of how.
Well, no, I literally read that. Like a member of Congress member of Congress who was prominent said, "Hey, he had, personal issues with the board. Like that's why he voted that way." And I'm like, no. I mean, everything I know about Steve shows me that he loves American rugby, and he is investing his time and his money to
he's been a very loyal servant of the game.
He is up for the cause. He is, he's wearing the colors, and he's a Scotsman.
Right.
So he is about that life.
Absolutely.
And 6 other people joined him in saying, "Hey, this ain't kosher." And then there were only 2 abstentions for Chad Keck. There were probably going to be 2 abstentions anyways, but there were 6 abstentions in a vote for Barbara O'Brien. Specifically, they were like, "We have no idea who this woman is."
Right.
You can't, for me, because I was a rugby player before I was a triathlete, but like all the governance stuff seems to be figured out.
Mm-hmm.
It's like people have to know who you are. You have to be a member in good standing to be part of this governance of a world-class and so successful organization that wins gold medals.
Right.
You know, you have to be known to the people. And what have you done for
having anything to do with rugby or whatever. Yeah.
What have you done for this sport in this country? And the back channel response, rather than, hey, publicly 30 days out, here's the packet, here's the brief of the nominee on the website, saying, hey,
here's a list of reservations, here's a list of endorsements, that type of thing.
Yeah. And it was, hey, her son played at Cal and she's been a spokesman for the sport ever since. And then you've talked to some people at Cal and they were like,
who?
I think I had an O'Brien.
Mm-hmm.
I think there was no O'Brien here. I think that's his mom. That was his mom. I think. I'm not sure. It doesn't, it wasn't one of the great parents,
right,
that are always, always coming back, always giving back. But it was like, he was a good player. Mm-hmm. But I think that person's his mom. Maybe. Like that was the response for people at Cal Berkeley.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not just talking, hey, Coach Clark, he didn't tell that to me. It was, hey, players from that vintage at Cal, and he was like, yeah, I remember that guy. Mm-hmm. I think that might be his mom. That was the response when you asked people around Cal who this person was, other than the random former lieutenant governor of Colorado 5 years ago.
Right.
And current at-large Board of Education member. I just didn't, it's like, if I don't know who you were, whereas we have these, if we're trying to make the board represent the people,
mm-hmm.
right? Make it more diverse, make it represent the people. There are women who are active members of the organization.
Yes.
Who
very accomplished.
Have the qualifications.
Mm-hmm.
Who have stayed connected since they won what is now recognized as the first Women's Rugby World Cup. It wasn't at that time. Because if you read, it's like Tony Riddell talked yesterday when he was live with Grant Cole, and he's at Club Sevens right now to just see, it's like people asked him, what have you done for rugby? I was like, well, I was an Eagle, and then I built this company that has 7 times the revenue of USA Rugby, and we're very profitable.
Mm-hmm.
And I focused on that. And then, I had some time, and that's how I've gotten back involved, and I've stayed, involved in the local area. But I mean, I had my thing to do, which I don't fault him for that, because, when you're globetrotting, to build a company they grossed $70 million last year.
Mm-hmm.
That takes a lot of time.
Absolutely. Well, you have to manage that.
So, and now he's in concert with his company. He's built his Rolodex. He's gotten re-involved with rugby in the United States. Every time he travels, he's usually on a business trip before he goes to any of these events. Like,
mm-hmm.
if it didn't involve, going to some conference in Germany, I don't think he would have gone to the Saracens quarterfinal with Glasgow.
Mm-hmm.
Things like that. Like everything, all these trips that everyone's like, well, he just goes to Hong Kong Sevens. It's like, no, he was at a business conference.
Right.
Hong Kong Sevens was just, he just stuck around for a couple days.
Right. Well, he makes sure that if he's traveling on his business's dime, who he has people that under his employ that he's responsible to, he's making sure he has legitimate business justification to do it.
It's like, hey, I might have been here a couple days longer anyways because of how the flights fell and how costs are. So I'm going to go to this and I'm going to rebuild those connections that I lost. So that's what he's been doing. And I respect that. You know, I proud of all the people that, you know, stay involved in the game. But there are also those people who have built these massive companies that are ready to come back.
Yes.
They're ready to come back now after they've spent 20, 30, some of them 40 years away from the game.
Mm-hmm.
That at least he felt like he was ready to come out because he got mad. And now he's throwing everything he has to help fix the union, and all these other people are still like we talked about. They're like, fix yourself, and then we'll come. Mm-hmm. So, you know, when you have these people in the organization that represent you, why did we not select one of those women from the World Cup to be on the board?
It's a very good question.
You know, or why did we not select a woman? Because not everyone on the World Cup team was on the first team, which was the 85 team. Mm-hmm. And there are many of them who are extremely successful as well. Mm-hmm. And I think I read so much history about it 2 weeks ago. I am literally, and this is not really to do with governance, but I think the women should not have the Eagles name. I think they should be what they, because they weren't allowed to use it then, they should be allowed to use whatever they want. I don't care. But I think as a throwback, as a homage to that women's team that started it all, they should be called the Wyverns, which is a dragon of some kind. That's what I think, because it's like, hey, they funded themselves. The union wanted nothing to do with them until like 94. It's like the second Women's World Cup was their money.
Right.
You know, like the union wanted nothing to do with the USA national team. Yeah, they were able to use the, you know, United States in 91, but for, you know, like 8 years, they weren't able to call themselves
Eagles,
you know. So that's where I think I read about that. I was like, you know, as a throwback, we should call the women the Wyverns because, you know, you look at NZ, like they're the Black Ferns. They're not the women's All Blacks. It's like our women have their own identity. Mm-hmm. So I think as a throwback and as a respect thing, we could, if there's that discussion, it's not my decision. You talk to the stakeholders. You talk to the stakeholders of that. You talk to the old girls that were on that team and say, hey, as a way to bring people back into the game, do you say, hey, we're establishing the women's Golden Eagles as a throwback to you and everything you did? Do you want us to change the name of the women's national team as respect to you, to what you guys were called? And a Wyvern is a dragon. Yeah. So I mean, you know, so that's just it's all about community and being non-exclusive, bringing everybody in. Mm-hmm. Everybody comes under the tent.
Sure.
And right now we're not doing that, and that's the problem.
Even when we pay lip service to it. And I think that's one of the things, especially with the women's game, that we really owe them much better than that. I wrote a piece in February about that really it's kind of a call to action. We have to be better fans and stakeholders of the women's game. If they're going to wear the crest, which they are wearing it should mean the same thing to us that they're wearing theirs as it does when we see the men do it. Now, if we decide they're going to be different crests and different names, then it really doesn't matter. Still under the same banner, that should still be the same. Because we don't want anyone who has the opportunity to represent us to feel that they weren't given their due in that representation. because it's an honor. If we tell them it's an honor to represent us in this nation, then we should back it up and treat them like it.
Yeah. So I say, I mean, depending on who they are, like what it is, I say complete. I wouldn't say equality because until World Rugby decides to, hey, we're going to have a test window and we're going to play 10 tests, the budgets may not be the same.
They're not going to balance.
But if the budgets were at least 50, if the women's budget was at least 50%, at least 50% of the men's budget, where would we be today?
I think we're looking at a completely different ball game. Like, think about, let's say it's activity-based costing, right? And say, okay, the women have this number of events in their window and these number of assemblies, and you fund per assembly. That's how you can achieve equity that way.
Yeah.
As the activity grows, then you grow the amount of funding to make sure that they're able to do that according to margin, blah, blah, blah. Any deficits that are created in that sense are then addressed at the end of the year through the means of through revenue, how they would do that.
Yeah.
I think that there's no any single person that I'm aware of that would be unhappy with equity. Yeah. At least at this juncture, because when we talk about returns, I always hear about returns and what people make on the events, but they always leave out that if you don't invest in something initially, you can't talk about the return. Yeah. So if you haven't invested in it in a similar way, how are you comparing the returns?
Yeah, so
and that's really the real question.
One of my biggest beefs, if we look at this World Cup and we look at how women's series work, because I looked at, I forget what the June series that England played down in New Zealand, where it was New Zealand, Canada, and Australia.
England. Yep.
I forget what they call the series. I can go look it up, but that's not the point. It's like, hey, we were supposed to play Japan on July 1st, and Japan pulled out. Mm-hmm. So we had to play the WPL match.
Yep, I remember.
And part of it was, I don't know exactly Japan's reasoning, and it really doesn't matter to me, but we couldn't find anyone else to play. And there were 12 teams that are not in this World Cup that were ranked ahead of Hong Kong that we could have played, that I'm sure would, if we went to them or they came to us, as long as we provided
a
matching incentive
mm-hmm.
to get them here,
mm-hmm.
we could have played them, and it would have been fine. And then you go into, this is World Rugby's fault, and people are like, why is Ireland, scheduling these fixtures like this, where they're playing all 6 matches on the same day, but then they're only 4 days apart? Like, that's ridiculous, right?
Yeah, it's quite a tilt.
And because the men's World Cup is not like that at all. There might be one game within 5 days, I think. I think the closest gap is 5 days.
Right.
And there's a few.
And everybody has that 1 week where they have a 5-day turnaround, if I remember correctly.
Yeah. So the women have to get ready, and it's just wild. But it's like that in the June series down in New Zealand. It was, every match was like that. It was 4 days, and that was more so replicate the conditions you will be in
mm-hmm.
at the World Cup.
Yep.
And then we played the
recovery planning, practice, getting the whole routine down.
Yeah.
So it's not unfamiliar to people that end up traveling to Ireland.
So basically they did pool play with what would have been a real pool of death if you had New Zealand, Australia, Canada, and England in the same pool, right? Mm-hmm. And in this World Cup, Canada and New Zealand are in the same pool. So, but they're probably coming out. So, but our Can-Am series back in March, April was under the exact same conditions. And I was just like, this makes no sense. Mm-hmm. Because if they had 6 days off, those that were for recovery, those that were banged up that might not be able to go in 4 days, they might be able to go in 7.
Well, I think also when we talk about not just recovery but overall preparation time. So with our team, one of the big issues is these women haven't had a chance to really play together.
Yeah. Right. So
they're introducing themselves at the first practice.
Yeah.
Like that's I think that Canada struggled with this as well. I interviewed Magali Harvey for 1v1. Once she approves, I put that up.
Amazing player.
Absolutely right. 41 points first game. I mean, I don't care if it's Hong Kong. That's 41 points.
Yeah. So we looked at us, and so we were supposed to have that June test. It fell out, or July test. It fell out. We had to fund for a long camp. The trust had to go out. The CEO, I think it was 3 times this year, has had to go out there with his hand in his pocket, and ask for money.
Yeah.
God bless the Prentice family. Yeah. They had one matching donation at the beginning. That was 20 grand. Yeah. And then they started, making some ways towards 100K. And then the trust changed its, goal to 150K.
Yeah.
And they tripled their total matching donation. So they threw in 60 grand for this thing.
Wow.
God bless them.
Absolutely.
But
absolutely,
the women, we should not have to do that.
Right. And think about this, right? To have to go, and so you're Dan Payne, you have to go with your hand out. And there are all these questions about our operations that you cannot answer. Like, how does that hamstring your ability to fundraise? That's one thing that I've seen organizations do this from the $300,000 level to the $30 million level. But going to talk to people, these corporate social responsibility folks, these foundation benefactors, these elderly folks who have retirements that are being left to organizations, you have to tell them what they're doing, what they're giving to. And you have to be able to answer their questions satisfactorily. They could be nitpicky. They could be silly. But in the end, their ability to see through your organization to the bottom is going to determine whether you're going to get the check or not.
Yeah, there are people out there, just like they do with colleges, because they don't have children or because they hate their kids, one of the two, or because they have their assets are that big. Right. There's going to be someone that played rugby in the United States that in the back of their mind, they would leave their estate to rugby.
Right.
But because of all these other things, we're losing out on that. So that's a problem to me. Well,
and when we talk about experience, right? Like, so think about in terms of as a woman, what a woman's experience with USA Rugby would be. When we talk about what you're managing is the experience. That's what determines your relationship, right? So a woman makes a ton of money. And then at the end of life, her kids are taken care of, her family's taken care of. She's lived her life. And she says, I'm going to will my money to what? And this is why I really push, because this goes back to me and my wife were selected to go to camp the same year. I had a $75 a day, basically per diem, because of the way our union worked it out. She had to pay out of pocket.
Yeah.
That's the relationship that they are creating with the women that play this sport.
Yeah. Right now, there's only one team that, the women's sevens are under contract, but that's
correct.
The men's sevens and the women's sevens, and then the men's 15s. Don't call this a contract, because I'm going to call this a subsistence allowance.
Yeah, it's like a stipend.
But if you are a women's sevens player, you have to live in San Diego, which, thank God that there are dormitories at Chula Vista. Right? But that's $2,800 a month, because it's for both men and women. Both men, it's the exact same.
Right.
They equalize the pay for sevens. The issue is when we come with 15s, women will get a stipend if there's money. If there's money, they get a stipend. If there's no money, they have to buy all their stuff.
Which is insane.
Like, you'll get housing, but you have to pay for your food, everything.
Yeah.
Wild. But so you go down to San Diego, right? I know now USA Rugby is looking for a location to develop and all of that stuff. They want free land. It's in the minutes.
Yeah.
February probably. I think maybe March. But they're looking for free land. Why do we need free land? I mean,
that just means we have to maintain it.
I mean, that just means so we don't have the sunk cost of buying it, but then we have the cost of developing it.
Maintaining it as an asset.
So that's fine. Like having this part of your strategic plan. Hey, we're going to have a permanent home for the United States Rugby Football Union. It's going to be a performance center, multiple pitches. We're going to have dormitories. We're going to run everything. Here's the thing. That balloons the national headquarters for support staff immensely. Yeah. So there needs to be a business plan to fund that support structure, to fund those employees.
Sustainably.
Yeah, sustainably. And there isn't. And that's so without even, contracting Chula Vista, since USOC sold that thing, but all of the other NGBs that have contract aren't in the same financial hole that we are. USA Archery makes money. They make money.
Really?
Yeah. Wow. They make money. All right. Yeah. They make real money. Oh. So you send a woman or you send a man down to Chula Vista. They have $2,800 a month before taxes to live. And it's California, right? So you're going to get hit in the shorts.
Yeah.
And that's not a lot of money.
No, it's not.
That's like 31 to 33, give or take, before taxes. And then you put in taxes. Thank God for the favors in kind.
Yeah.
But it's not a lot, Hopefully you don't have student loans.
Well, that's the other thing, right? Like making sure you're able to subsist, right? Like the idea of being a young adult. I mean, granted, it's the time of your life where you can manage having the least liabilities you can have to pursue these things, but that's not going to help you be competitive against folks that don't have to worry about that. No,
because like sevens against every, say, tier 1 nation. Their depth of player base is so much that they have specialists, but if you look at New Zealand sevens other than their Olympic team, those are guys that don't make the development side. So they have to specialize.
They don't start on their provincial professional side.
Yeah. So
DJ Forbes doesn't start at flanker for his team.
Yeah. So the depth of player base is so much that, Madison Hughes wouldn't get a sniff on the 15s.
Right.
I mean, the players that come through, their backs, like Sonny Bill went to the Olympics for NZ.
Right.
But the reality is they didn't need Sonny Bill Williams because the depth of their sevens program is so and even their sevens program specialists, right?
Right.
They've got 30 men. They've got 30 women.
That are lights out.
Right? So that's where, I say when we come up with a strategic plan, business plan, the quantifiable goals are hosting a World Cup, and a real World Cup. And in between that, people say what they will about how World Rugby looks at the Women's World Cup, but we do what we got to do to make it so good that they're like, well, all these other bids are going to be like, we're lights out.
Yeah.
Guess what?
That's why I say we need to be Americans.
At home? Who makes more at home? Not across the world, but at home. When you look at the soccer national teams, who makes more money? Right. Who makes more money? Not the men. The men get paid more, and that was a problem. That was a massive problem domestically.
Yeah.
But now
I'm glad they stood up.
They stood up.
I stood up with them. Like,
They stood up, and now max centralized contract for women's soccer players $200,000.
Yeah,
and their minimum contracts are like $50,000.
And that's something.
So
ball game.
Whether you're an amateur or because there is the NWSL. So if you are playing in the NWSL, the pay isn't that good, but it's enough.
Sure, I know some folks. The team here in DC. There are a couple of women from Nigeria that play for them. And so it's not, she has an apartment. She has, all these things are where she's able to live reasonably comfortably based on what they're getting there. It's kind of like when you say who makes more money. That's where I'm saying we got to put something on where we can be Americans. Yeah. And put out the best product we can put out there,
So, and this is where I'm like, hey, domestically, our women were the winners.
Yeah.
Historically, other than 80 years ago, where we won 2 gold medals because folks decided not to show up, and for some reason, they said, "Hey, we're just not going to show up."
And you're like, okay.
Well, I don't care. I showed up. I won. You didn't.
Yeah.
You didn't show up. That was your choice. But when people showed up, our women were the winners.
Yep.
And we have not capitalized on that. So for me, domestically, women's soccer has the highest ratings, makes the most money domestically. FIFA's payouts are going to be higher for men because outside of this country, women's soccer doesn't make that kind of cash.
Right. Outside of maybe a few countries. Not even we're far and away the highest.
Yeah, but we shouldn't be worried about FIFA's payouts to be equitable
for our people.
For our people.
Right.
We worry about our people. We take care of our people. And that's where we're at with our women's national team. It's like historically, they've not been taken care of.
Right.
And they need to be taken care of.
I agree.
We need to capitalize on their legacy because their legacy is one of winning.
Yeah.
Because guess what? If we told our rugby story, the women's shirt would be worth sponsoring.
Yeah.
So I think, unless you got anything else, Tosan, I think that about wraps it up. I think we've been.
Yeah, man. Hey,
we've been going. So
hey, we did our thing, man. It was good.
So we're gonna sign off.
All righty.
And call it good.